So first I would like to introduce Eric Mann, whose greatness continues to be his understanding of mass organizing, his commitment to building mass movements, to train mass organizers, not in the Alinsky-type mode of disruptions and disconnected from reform fights, but in a Marxist-based mode of fighting to change the entire social system. He epitomizes the warrior who will never give up. He is a veteran of the Congress of Racial Equality, SDS, and the United Auto Workers. He's the director of the Labor Community Strategy Center in Los Angeles. So welcome.
Hey everybody, thank you so much for coming. This is exciting. I was in Harlem my first time working with the Congress of Racial Equality, 1964, organizing the Trailways porters who were tote that barge and lift that pail, and at that time they were carrying people's bags. And they wanted to drive a bus. And that was a radical concept at the time, and Trailways would not let them be bus drivers or ticket agents or information clerks in that deep southern city called the Port Authority Terminal in New York. So that's where we started, was to try to fight racism in the North. I've been with the Newark Community Union and worked there for several years and lived in the black community, and then I worked with Students for Democratic Society, and I worked 10 years on an assembly line with the United Auto Workers. In between, I spent 17 months and 5 days in prison and 30 days in solitary and a few other things. But for the last 24 years, I've been working to build the Labor Community Strategy Center, which is an explicitly left project based on different people's understandings of it, but in my case, based on what I call but the anti-racist, anti-imperialist United Front. And what that means is that we live in a racist society, we live in an imperialist society, which means that the United States is a world empire, and therefore the struggle against empire is the central question that determines whether or not you're left or not, let alone what the left should do. So we fast forward today to numbers, people, events. A group of organizers with the Bus Riders Union go, we're the Bus Riders Union, and this is our fight. Mass transportation is a human right. We want a 50-cent fare and $20 passes, because mass transportation belongs to the masses. So then we came up with this idea called Fight Transit Racism, and Billions for Buses. Fred and I both talk about the concept. He calls it prefiguration. I don't know what I call it, visionary imagination. We both operate off a very, in some ways, similar concept of you dream and then you organize to achieve the dream, but that's what Lenin said. That's what Malcolm said. That's what Martin Luther King said. That's what a whole lot of people said, but it's hard to do. It's hard to lay out very bold ideas, but then realize you have to build a movement, person by person, to carry those ideas out. So in LA today, we developed this thing called Billions for Buses, which people laughed about. We built an organization called the Bus Riders Union Sindicato de Pasajeros, and 10 years later we had won $2.7 billion in new buses for the Black and Latino community in Los Angeles. And the Bus Riders Union is a well-known civil rights organization all over the country. We then developed this concept of stopping the school-to-prison pipeline, which is part of a broader question of stopping the mass incarceration of Black and Latino people. And we like to use these counter-hegemonic concepts. So we've been developing the concept of free the US 2.5 million. Because, you know, when I was there, it was free Los Siete de la Raza, free the Panther 21, free, you know, but we have to free not just the US 2.5 million, but the 7 million people that are under police control. Because when I got out of prison, I still had 3 years of probation that they could have dropped another 2 years, put me back in prison. So for those 3 years, I was tap dancing pretty carefully because I had a parole officer. So all the people that are meeting these young kids today were still saying, I'm on parole, I'm on probation. So we just won a very big victory in Los Angeles, which is the Los Angeles Unified School District overturned a school discipline concept called willful defiance, which had been used to expel mainly black boys from the public schools under a non-arguable concept of willful defiance. And we got them to remove that as a grounds for suspension and expulsion. But the more fundamental question, and I've been thinking about this a lot, is, of course, we need a lot of willful defiance. And the pain that's been inflicted on black people through the whole series of counter-revolutions, the re-enslavement after slavery, the destruction of Reconstruction that Du Bois talks about, the end of Jim Crow, only to be led to a mass incarceration that's almost hard to comprehend, because in the 60s we had 200,000 people in prison. 200,000, which we thought was as criminal as anybody could comprehend, and there's now 2.5 million. And I would argue that the hoodie, the angry black man, is the enemy of the state, because the black liberation movement has played an incredibly important frame for revolutionary thought in the United States and internationally, and it's the basis of my own consciousness, having worked in the black liberation movement so much in my life. So let's talk about a little theory now. Everything is theory and practice. Matt, where are we in time? I'm watching my time. All right, I'm gonna keep going. In Los Angeles today, we've initiated a campaign called the Fight for the Soul of the Cities, and I want to talk to you a little bit about that. As I said, that's a frame based on the anti-racist, anti-imperialist United Front. Within that frame is the fight for the soul of the cities. Within that frame is the social welfare state, not the police state, the environmental justice state, not the warfare state. So we are saying that as a mass question, and it's important for organizers to come up with ideas, because revolutions are fundamentally about ideas, that are starting popularizing. So a lot of people are saying, yeah, I'm for the social justice state, not the police state, which means they're beginning to articulate that we live in a police state. For the environmental justice state, not the warfare state. So we're bringing that as a mass concept, and then under that, we have demands. And the demands are also very big picture demands. 1,000 more buses, 1,000 less police. As I say to people when you go on the bus, we want 1,000 more buses, 1,000 less police. What don't you understand about that? Everybody understands it. It's just a question, are they for it or against it? Then we have the Free the US 2 million. We have a campaign, No Cars in LA, which means no cars in LA. It means that if we're eco-socialists, if we believe in ecological anti-imperialist revolution, then we have to radically restrict production and consumption in an imperialist nation, in an imperialist empire. That's to say, it's no longer a voluntary choice whether or not you pollute or not. It's very interesting. We want to sort of free the US 2.5 million prisoners and imprison the 8 million cars in LA and prevent them from going out. And it's very interesting how people say, you can't take away my freedom to drive, but you can lock up all the kids. That's okay. So we're trying to have these conversations, because that's a lot what people want to do, is talk about the future of the society and the world. And we talk about the fact that the greenhouse gases in Los Angeles that we produce through our cars are killing the people in the small island states of Tuvalu, of the Marshall Islands. That is to say, their cultures are being drowned by our avarice and pollution. And they are begging us, when we went to the UN, to say, what are you going to do about the United States? That's what the Vietnamese asked us to do. What are you going to do about the United States? That's what the South Africans asked us to do. Don't worry about our struggle against apartheid. What are you going to do about the United States? And then be in solidarity with our struggle against apartheid. So we're raising the question that we have a special obligation, living in the heart of the empire, to be
anti-imperialist in the most explicit and internationalist way possible. So in my opinion, the eco-socialist movement must be tied to a very explicit anti-racist, anti-imperialist politics. Because eco, as you were saying, is not automatically defined. Socialist is not automatically defined. And there's a lot of people who say they're eco and socialist who would not support no cars in LA, who would not oppose the drones, who would talk about building socialism inside the territorial borders of the United States, and they call that socialism, which is dividing up the spoils of empire and having a redistribution theory, which is not what we believe in the Strategy Center. When my wife Leanne Hurst-Mann and I went to Germany, and Leanne opened up and said the primary obligation of people in the oppressor nations is to support the people in the oppressed nations, the German left said, what? What are you talking about? Are you talking about Hitler? Well, yeah, but we're also talking about Germany today is the arch-imperialist in Europe. And the German left just couldn't grasp Kurds or Turks or what role Germany was playing in the world. So my politics is sort of based on a couple of things right now about where the left should go. First, putting out very big picture, anti-hegemonic, counter-hegemonic ideas into society. Two, working in Black and Latino communities to build the Black and Latino strategic united front against imperialism, which will of course reach out to Asian Pacific Islanders, to all oppressed nationality people, to anti-racist whites, to other classes and races, but it starts in the Black and Latino Strategic Alliance in alliance with the nations and peoples of the Third World. That's been my strategy since I got involved in the movement before I knew what strategy was. I was against racism, I was against the war in Vietnam, and I came to understand through SNCC's Hell No, We Won't Go, through Muhammad Ali's No Viet Cong Ever Called Me That, the concept that the Black liberation movement was tied to the anti-war movement and that we were in an anti-racist, anti-imperialist united front. After you put these ideas out, you gotta train organizers, and we have been able to recruit young Black and Latino kids. Would have slogans, hey, Los Angeles Unified School District, I'm pre-med, I'm pre-job, I'm not pre-prison. And we have built a movement, along with other people, other forces in Los Angeles, to counter the racist ideology of the system. But these kids care about LGBTQ issues, they care about the war, they care about no drones. They are internationalists in their orientation, and they're, as one 27-year-old said to the 17-year-olds, when I was your age, and she had worked with us for 10 years, I said, Carla, you're only 27, give it a break. But the point is we are training a new generation of organizers, and I'd like to talk about that later, but understand that the people who went down south were organizers. They were not simply agitators or activists. An organizer and a cadre, you put your body on the line and you build a movement of oppressed people. Then you have to build alliances with people that are not revolutionaries, but who actually might support you more than a lot of people who say they're revolutionaries. So don't write off the minister, don't write off the elected official, don't write off anybody. Carry out a hegemonic campaign and then build people around you, align, build forms of organization, build forms of struggle, develop an international strategy, work with people all over the world, and overthrow the empire. Now, so I got a lot more to say, but I'd rather sing. So I'm going to end my song with the, it's called A Mother's Prayer, or Can't You See What You Done by the Persuasions. And it embodies, to me, the anti-racist, anti-imperialist united front. Boom, 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 boom. Hey, I was sitting in a park one day, boom, 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 happy as a lark one day. I heard a mother say, boom, boom, on a bright and sunny day, America, boom, boom, did you see what you done to my only son? My only son, boom, 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 my only son. Ain't you see what you done to my only son? While he was fighting in your war, boom, 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 boom. America, they say you gave me my only son, boom, boom. But right away you sent the boy off, yes you did, to fight over in Vietnam, boom, boom. He was a real good soldier, oh yeah, you know he really tried to do his part. And I was so proud of the boy when you gave him the medal you called the Purple Heart. Boom, 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 boom. I didn't know when you sent my son off to serve his country that you would send my son back to me, a stone junkie. Ain't you see what you done to my only son? I'm talking about my only son. Oh, boom, 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 my only son. Ain't you see what you done to my only son? While he was fighting in your war, boom, 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 boom. Ooh, watched him the other day, boom, boom, stealing money from my purse, boom, boom, boom. That's when I knew the boy's habit, oh yeah, had gotten a whole lot worse. Well, to fight for this country, oh yeah, that's a hell of a price to pay. 'Cause my son died of an overdose just yesterday. That's why I'm singing it, to see what you done to my only son. Talking about my only son. Boom, 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 my only son. Ain't you see what you done to my only son? While he was fighting in your war, boom, 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 boom. While he was fighting in your war, boom, 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 boom. While he was fighting in your war.